And my computer's just not working. There we go. As usual, mute your mic when necessary. We're going to have you listen deeply, move with yes and of course be patient with technology because it doesn't always work the way we want it to. So, Chat Storm, top 10 meeting ideas. We're actually going to be using this for our latest newsletter. So, please send us some really good ideas that we can put in our newsletter for good meeting ideas that people like, whether it's a book club, whether it's get out at a pizza place. What are some of your great meeting ideas? Let's see them in the chat. So things to think about. And then let's see, what do we have? No one said anything. Definitely open up your chats, let me know. But then I will also go on. There we go. I'm so excited. One of my favorite people is going to be here today. I can't just call her a support group leader because I was thinking about this and I lead a support group, but she leads an enterprise. So her group does so much. There's vocal exercise, music therapy, there's a card game group, there's art therapy, fitness classes, there's boxing, there's chair yoga, they have brain games, monthly support group meetings for everyone, monthly support group meetings for care partners. It's just really incredible. And so we're just so happy she's here. I do remember meeting her and thinking to myself, one sad day she's going to go to heaven and we are all going to be sad, but she's going to get up there and she's going to say, I have some suggestions and some improvements for you. And so I'm just thanking Mary Jane for being here. I'm going to let you take it away.
All right. Well, hi everybody, and thank you so much. God, it's good to see. It's good to see some usual faces that I see all the time. I'm adjusting my screen. My screen, doggone it, the computer broke, and you know why we have to be flexible? Well, I'm flexible now. I have no screen on my computer, so I have to look at an external monitor. So I'll try to make some eye contact. But anyway, thank you. Gosh, Eden, that was very nice for everything that you said, and in all sincerity, though, is it's more of just an act of love to serve others, and you'll hear about that in my little talk. I was asked to speak about burnout, and I think the reason why they chose burnout is I was getting a little burned out and is a support group leader after 13 years of doing this. However, I'm still very involved, and it is my true passion to serve. And so I will still be involved, even though I'm not actually leading it as the executive director. But one of the things that the ladies asked me to share was just a little bit about burnout strategies. So I do have a PowerPoint, and I'm going to go on and share it right now with y'all. And let's see. We'll go on and do that. Put it right back up here from the beginning. Slideshow from the beginning. Okay, there we go. All right. Are y'all able to see the slides okay, everybody? Yes, thumbs up. Okay, good. Okay. So I am with Georgetown Area Parkinson Support Group. I've shared it with many that initially when my husband was diagnosed, that's when I started going to the group. There was about 10 people, and to be honest with you, it was kind of depressing to go to it. In fact, my husband wouldn't even attend. And so I was in it since 2007, and it was kind of like a little helper bee. And I set up as more of a member. And then in 2011, became a facilitator. And in 10 years later, we became a nonprofit, and I became the executive director. So we're known as GAPS, Georgetown Area Parkinson Support Group. And one of the things I can say is leading a support group can be exhausting, and that is true, but there's hope. And there is hope in that, and this is kind of what it looked like. Many times, this is what I look like. I was busy on the computer and it's just like, oh my gosh. But there's hope in the fact that it's a blessing to you and to others when you serve. And by just helping others, it can bring joy and fulfillment. And that's very much how I brought it to our support group was to help them. And so hopefully some of these things I'll be going through with y'all will help y'all as the support group leaders also help your members. And many of you guys know me, and I'm just incredibly strong believer, and I strive to follow the scripture of First Peter 4:10 and 11. And that just basically said each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as just faithful stewards of God's grace in various forms. And that's what I felt like. It was a gift that I have with some organizational tendency, as well as to, just to be outgoing and to serve. I just always felt like that. And that was one of my gifts, it was just to do it. But what is burnout? Support group burnout refers to physical, emotional, and mental behavioral exhaustion. And it can occur if you participate in or if you leading support groups for an extended period of time. And again, for me, it was right at 13 years. Now, my background is a registered nurse. So I knew a lot of this stuff and I wanted to bring this to help serve others. But at the same time, it oftentimes I thought, am I really accomplishing anything? And sometimes the burnout is when you feel like that you're not accomplishing something. It can be seen in healthcare professionals, caregivers. Caregiver burnout, as we all know, is very important. And it's just a recognized fact that in support groups that the leader can have some burnout. Mine was almost doubly because my husband has had Parkinson's now for over 20 plus years. As we all know, you have Parkinson's for several years prior to diagnosis. So I was kind of working with both of them, and the causes for burnout is just the emotional demand and stress. A lot of it I put upon myself because I wanted things to go well, and lack of support or resources. Now that's something that we all as support group leaders definitely have felt, and lack of support. I mean, sometimes you're the only one doing stuff, and we really need to build that team of volunteers to help us and help us so that we could help ourselves by self care. And then just if there's organizational issues such as poor management, I did have a person that was helping me, and I gave this individual some things to do, and unfortunately, they just put it on the back burner. Their that was not their gift, and so sometimes that contributed to my burnout because I felt like I ended up having to pick it up. The physical signs of burnout: fatigue, headaches, increased heart rate, and even blood pressure, digestive problems, weakened immunity system, difficulty falling or staying asleep, and changes in appetite. And I want to stress because many of the support group leaders have these same issues. And even some of you guys that have Parkinson's that are support group leaders, you're not immune. Obviously, this is doubly with Parkinson's, that you can just have some of these physical signs. The emotional signs would be helplessness, cynicism, detachment or depersonalization, and with that leads to decreased satisfaction, loss of motivation or interest. And then I needed to put a check mark there, but decreased empathy and irritability and feelings of failure. These are all just a few of some of the emotional signs. So if you find yourself sometimes feeling this, it doesn't mean you have to have all of them. You can just have one of them, but it could be just a sign of burnout. I'm going to share with you some strategies that I even used to help with this. And I again was not immune. I felt some of these signs. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Behavioral signs: decreased performance, increased procrastination, neglecting your personal needs. That's something right there that really hit me. I was a big hiker and led a hike in Sun City, Georgetown, Texas, where I live. We have a big, very active hiking club, and I was a hike leader. And I found the last 2 years, I didn't even get out to hike, period, much less lead. So it just one of those things that I was neglecting personal care. Withdrawal and disengagement, in other words, you're just not getting as involved. The isolation, sometimes a hard time just to make a decision, and then avoiding responsibilities. These are all behavioral signs of burnout. Again, it doesn't mean that you have to have all of them, just even one of them. You're just starting to get stressed with this. So now let's talk about just managing. What can we do? Obviously, practicing self care. It was so funny. I led our care. I do still lead our caregiver group. And in the caregiver group, I'm stressing to my caregivers, okay, now you need to get out, you need to take a walk, you need to make some time for yourself, go out. with some friends, just about you and a girlfriend, or if it's a guy, and I have many guys that are in my support group, I says, you guys need to have some buddy system and, go on out and do some guy stuff. And so I'm always encouraging them. Yet in my own thoughts, it was like, yeah, but you're not doing this either, Mary Jane. You need to do this. And it's so easy for us not to follow our own advice. But I do know that this is so important. And the mindfulness based intervention, we actually had a speaker that talked to us. And I one of the reasons why I got the speaker to speak on mindfulness was so I could learn and maybe pick up some of this myself. Reducing workloads and finding more efficient system. Well, again, I would try to involve my volunteers, and I will say I was so fortunate to have a fabulous caregiver who said, Mary Jane, I think you might need some help. And she was a godsend. I referred to Patty. Her name was Patty. Some of you have met her as my right arm and my left arm because she was right there too, that I could say, can you do this for me? And she was right there to help me out. So in your support groups, you may be looking for some folks that you feel are really strong that can help you out, that you don't want to overburden them, but can really relieve you for some of the stuff that you need to do. Engaging on one coaching. One of the things I'll talk about that, and you'll see it in my next slide, is just with other support group leaders and talking to them. How do you do this? And can you get some help here? And I'll share more on that in just a few moments. The peer support, of course, and sharing experiences with the others kind of go with the one-on-one coaching or therapy. And if some people actually have, I know of some support group leaders are actually in therapy themselves to kind of help themselves so they can help others. So it's okay. But notice I even highlighted it, connecting with other support groups. And that's one of the things I do. And interesting enough, this is also one of the things that I share with our members because I'll do presentations to other groups as well as into my own support group members. But many people find that support groups will kind of help them to cope with day to day. And I kept this same slide in for this presentation because we can learn from other support groups. And so I've just in my area right here, I've got some of these in Texas, but I will say PMD Alliance. When I found these guys, and I'm being very sincere, it was just like, wow, this is fabulous. This is what I need. And I remember seeing some of their stuff first and not really getting involved initially. And then going on and about it took me about a year to really start getting more involved. And it was tremendous support. The Parkinson Foundations, and that is Parkinson Foundation, APDA, Brian Grant, Davis Finney, connecting with all of those groups for help, for support, using some, not reinventing the wheel, using some of their handouts and some of their stuff to build and to do. I organized a Parkinson 101 symposium this past fall of 2024, and I couldn't have done it on my own, but I contacted all of these support groups, the foundations as well as PMD Alliance, and received tremendous support that I was able to share. So I just want to share with you as a support group leader that we've got some other resources out there to help us. Again took this slide from PMD Alliance because just as our person with a movement disorder, we build a support for them. We as support group leaders also can build this same support. Like right up there, my spouse and adult children for the care partner. Well, my spouse, Dave, helped me a whole lot. In fact, I'll give him things. Dave is my husband. Will you proof this, or what do you think of this? How does this read? And he'll give me the feedback that I need. And of course, our professional other groups, as well as our doctors. I do use other medical resources to help me not only to get speakers, but to help me review. As a support group leader, many times I would get questions either by email or people calling me. And even though I'm a registered nurse and maybe I'm familiar with the topic, I wanted to refer it to a medical consultant in order to advise me on what to do. So just like we have built here, Parkinson Movement Disorder Alliance is built here, this beautiful wheel of all of the supports and the spokes that help the center. That is what we as support group leaders also need. And some of the coping strategies that support group leaders really need, of course, as we hear, I just said it, external help. humor as an alternative point of view. I'll guarantee you, like I just shared with you, that my computer fell and the screen went black. I didn't know if the hard drive was messed up or not. And this was the day before my very last meeting. I mean, and so I'm having to go to Best Buy and figure out how to do set up an external monitor and to work with this. And all I could do then, I just started to laugh. I thought, oh my gosh, come on now. And I see that as a trial. And so, in order to build perseverance and endurance and coping, I just went to laughter. I just said, my goodness, what next? So, well, you know what happened next? My car went out on me there at Best Buy. The total thing shut down. It was the weirdest thing. I had to call a tow truck. He's like, ma'am, I've never seen anything like this. I don't know why. It was the electronic system went down. So we had to have it towed to an auto place. So I learned not to ask what's next because sometimes that could happen. But in all sincerity, I just said, oh my gosh. And I just laughed. You know what I did that next morning? Because I had so much stuff to take because it was a big luncheon. I called three of my friends, and these three friends came over with their cars, and we loaded everything up. So this is where it's fabulous to have a volunteer support group that you can just call upon. But up there, studying and learning, I'm continuing to always learn, even with our Parkinson's. That's why I love the webinars on all of the foundations, as well as PMD Alliance, their webinars. You can learn so much. Um, of course, me, I use the spirituality, which is mine, what I said. Trying to manage the stress, just realizing, okay, this I know this is stuff, so that's where I chose laughter. Music can be one, physical exercise, meditation. But I did a lot of talking to a confidant, my friend Patty, who I shared. There would be times I'd call her up and say, okay, now what are we going to do about this? What do you think? Just it was more of venting. And I thanked her for just allowing me to vent. So again, as a support group leader, if you can have a good confidant, a good friend that sometimes you can just vent with, and then you can sometimes come up with some really good ideas. So these are just a few things. I found a resource. I don't know if Kelly may want to put this in the chat or Eden. It's called luminarycounseling.com. They have a whole lot of really good resources for burnout. That are specific for the mental health counselors as well as for us as support group leaders, and simple practices, strategies, um, guided meditations, that sort of thing. And I've used this website before just to go to, because one of the things we can always keep learning. I don't care how old we are. Every day is a new opportunity to learn something new. And I will say that I do that, and I do that with um, hopeful anticipation that I will retain what I learned, but for sure, so that I can learn. Final thoughts. Final thoughts. You can't pour from an empty cup. You've got to refresh yourself, and I do know that, and that's where I was fortunate to have someone to be able to call and to talk to, and help me fill my cup, set boundaries. I will be the first to say that I was not always so good at that. I've got girlfriends that say, Mary Jane, just say no, just say no. That's one I'm still working on, to be honest with you, because I don't always say no. I always go, oh yeah, let me work it in, and then I get stressed. Okay, true confessions. I finished this presentation this morning, so I mean that's true. I don't always follow some of my advice, but I strive to do so. Self care and breathe. Just sometimes, and I will say, I'm here at the computer and working on things. I go, okay, I just have to take a deep breath, and I will just get up and just take a quick walk and then come back. And I'm usually a lot better to be able to continue. Support is essential. I've said that now already over. Ask for help. Being mindful, acknowledge your successes, because sometimes when I tend to get a little overwhelmed, I'll think, okay, yeah, but this went okay. Just give it some time. You can work it through. And so acknowledge your successes that you've had in the past that you can help, and then identify what you can and cannot control. There are some things that I just cannot control. I will say sometimes I have some people with Parkinson's that'll call me, and I take on their burdens in the sense that they're just sharing and pouring out their heart, and some things I can help them with, and some things I just know I cannot. And that's when I do referral. I do have a whole list of of different, from home care to transportation to mental health counselors, that I can refer others to help them, because I know I cannot control it or I cannot do that. But another one is find meaning in what you do. I mean, for me, I do have joy and satisfaction if I can help someone else. That's a blessing back to me. So it's a win-win for both of us then. And then start each day with gratitude. Of course, as my next one is pray. The very first thing I do is just say thank you for this day and thank you for this opportunity to serve others. And that's kind of how I'll begin the day. And now it's just back to questions. So this is short and sweet. The lady said they wanted it short and sweet so we can talk about things. You can ask me some questions, or yeah, or you can break into your groups, whatever you want to do. But I just wanted to share that little bit, and I hope that helps some folks.
Well, we did have one question if you'd be willing to share your slides.
Of course,
Okay, because we
of
say you
course,
can
of course.
email
I'll
those.
send them to you, Eden.
Perfect. And we did put the resources that you provided in the chat. Does anybody have any other questions for Mary Jane before we break into our groups? Keep in mind, William Shatner would be honored to play Mary Jane because that's how in charge of the Enterprise she is. Well, then one group is going to be lucky enough to have Mary Jane in the group with them. But we're going to go ahead. Kelly's going to put you into your individual groups. I'm going to suggest a topic as to what you're doing to either recognize burnout or combat burnout. But as always, this is just a suggestion. So if you guys choose to talk about something else, that's okay too. And we'll see you back in about, oh, don't make me do math, like 45 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. So I always like to hear what everyone had to talk about. So let's go to room 1 with Gregory and I'm thinking Eileen, Jennifer, Jim, Judy, and Sandy.
And what would you like?
Who would like to come off mute and share what you guys discussed?
I think we actually discussed the topic.
Oh.
For the most part. We had a lot of discussion about burnout in the beginning, and I think we talked a lot about ideas for. I think Greg had a good. He brought out his Eisenhower chart, so beware. But he has a great idea for how he prepares his group for the year. I think was very interesting. A little more effort than I would do, but very, very detailed, interesting, and also a good form chart for doctor's visits. And we talked about ideas for, keeping the group interested. And anybody else want to add?
No, it was a good discussion. Yeah. I was more concerned about how to keep the group alive and topics of interest and keeping people involved and having not a meeting run by 5 people talking when you got 25 people at the group. So you want to get everybody involved in it. So we moved through that a little bit. Ideas. What it boils down to, we're all do things slightly different though. I mean, some of you are the whole program in your area. And we're just one aspect of our program, which is an excellent program.
Gregory, you want to come off and just tell us what an Eisenhower chart is? Now I'm curious.
Sure. Me Over PD is an organization that I read a lot of their research findings and that kind of thing. They have, if you notice, there's a picture of a human body here. And these are all the symptoms, there are over 100 of them, that you could potentially have with Parkinson's. And so what I do is I take each of these symptoms and highlights the ones that I suffer from. And the way you do that is you take all these different symptoms and just give them a score of 1 to 10. 1 is it's virtually meaningless to you. 10 is it's everything very important. Then what I do to figure out where do you spend your time is I then plot those quadrants. So if something got an 8, that means it is both a symptom that I have a lot of severity with, and it impacts my lifestyle. For me, that would be things like drooling, short-term memory loss, executive functioning, aspiration, apathy. So I need to focus. The Eisenhower quadrant tells you that this upper quadrant that is both important and urgent, focus on those things. Now, here's some symptoms that I suffer from: dead arm swing, olfaction, I can't smell. Now, olfaction is a great example of, guess what? I can't hardly smell anything, even when I take smell tests. And Michigan, the University of Michigan State has an outstanding smell test. But guess what? Society doesn't care. I don't care. When's the last time somebody gave you a hard time about, well, I don't think you smell very well? Not meaning you stink, but you can't smell the food in the restaurant or so forth. So I spend very little time working on issues like that. And so the Eisenhower quadrant is something I learned in the world of consulting that I use to help me and the people in my support groups focus on the stuff that we can have some impact on.
Thank you for sharing, Greg. I'm looking up Eisenhower quadrant, but I'm not really finding like a good to do it. Like I put in the other in the chat. The
He said me
symptoms.
over PD was his website. Me over PD.
Yes, but then when you actually go there, I got the symptoms there. I didn't get the Eisenhower quadrant. So when I Googled that, I got more like images for that. And I'm like, okay, I want to find that.
Yeah, the Eisenhower quadrant is not under me over PD. It's just I know to do it because this is one of the, when you work with a company or a business and you're trying to be a consultant and you talk to 27 people, well, they all have thousands of reasons why everything's not working right. And one way to isolate the real culprits is an Eisenhower quadrant.
And where do you find that?
Where do I find that?
Where do we find the Eisenhower quadrant? How do we get that?
I first read about it, probably 40 years ago.
But your sheet, with the sheet that you showed, the where do we find that?
I handmade that.
Oh.
So you see the color coding: motor,
Yes.
non-motor, and psychological. And then I just use I made literally got out a ruler, made 10 perfect, squares and stuff like that.
Greg kept it old school.
I am old school. I dislike technology. I think we often as humans, I do not think have the wisdom to use the speed and power of technology.
Well, thank you guys for sharing. We're going to move on to room 2. We have Dave Orlowski, we've got Karen, and we've got Randy. Who wants to come off mute and share what you talked about? I should say Karen Williams.
Well, we took some of Mary Jane's topic. Mary Jane brought up some great talking points, and we kind of built on some of those. Talked about volunteering, getting people to volunteer, the importance of getting new blood in the support group system. So we talked about support group structures, the way that our different support groups are structured. Talked about how many about getting the amount of participation. We talked about sometimes when you have a small group, if only 5 people show up for the meeting, sometimes those are the best meetings you end up having. And because people, as someone put it, was more likely to shed their skin in those kind of meetings. We talked about problem participants, people that are overly negative, that bring the other people down, or to try to bring the other people down, and that results in other people not wanting to participate because of these people. Help me out, Karen.
We also talked about people's perceptions of what a support group is. And I had said that we had sort of dropped that from the main name of our group, because some people are expecting something like Alcoholics Anonymous, where they all get together and, you know, talk about their situation. And as it turns out, our monthly meetings are educational, but we also have true support groups of 10, 15, 20 people, where people really do get together. And sort of connected with that, I think, is something that Dave mentioned, is that sometimes people will show up to a meeting and then they don't come back. And I said that sometimes I hear from people, well, they see the person in the wheelchair or with a walker or whatever, that's all they can concentrate on. They can't see the people whose Parkinson's is managed very well. And I suggested calling people who come to a meeting, welcoming them. Can I help you? Is there anything? Do you have suggestions for meetings? Could I connect you with somebody to talk about your Parkinson's? It is sad when they come and then they don't return. You know, you wonder why they don't come back.
Sounds like you guys had a good group.
Yeah.
It is tough though when you're leading a group and you feel like somebody is trying to kind of suck the air out of it, and you're like, how do I handle this situation but still be nice? And that's something we actually will be discussing at a later group, because we know it is something that comes up a lot. So we will be discussing it because it is a hard one.
Well, Randy, could you talk about what's happening in your group? Because perhaps some other people have dealt with that. She has a virtual group with a negative person in it, and other people are dropping out because they just can't relate to her. Randy, could you say a little bit more about what you're experiencing?
Yeah. I have a virtual group with just women with PD, and they're all over the country. Even I have one from Canada, and they're not caring for this new woman because she's very, very negative. And we've tag teamed her trying to get the positivity side coming out, and we just can't manage to flip her.
And I asked Randy where she was in her Parkinson's, and she said she's newly
newly
diagnosed. And it sounds like she's dealing with the diagnosis, you know, with a lot of negativity. And I suggested perhaps that could be a topic of discussion, is what were people's first reactions to the diagnosis? And if it was negative, what they did to overcome some of that.
Ashley would also like you to maybe share some information on how to join your group, Randy. But
go ahead.
But then I was going to say, I am curious. So, have you spoken to her privately?
I have.
Okay.
Yes.
Was she open to
No.
what you had to say? No. Okay.
Setting ground rules before you start.
What would those ground rules be?
Yeah.
Well, that
No
would be
negativity?
Well,
I mean,
no.
does she realize she's being negative?
We one thing we talk about is because we don't want toxic positivity where it's like everything's great when it's like sometimes things aren't great, but let's laugh at them and let's look at, for example, what about your life isn't bad or what about your life is okay. But I always kind of say to people, a good rule of thumb is if you look around the support group, like right now we have, 16 people on this chat. And, if this was a support group where right now we have 90 minutes, but we have 60 minutes, it's kind of like to say to yourself, you can only have X amount of minutes because we want everybody to have a chance to speak. And so if you feel like you've taken 20 minutes and there's more than 3 people in this group, then there's a problem. You've kind of talked a little bit too much. And it's one thing when it's a good discussion and maybe, sometimes when somebody is brand new to the group, they might talk a little bit more because people are asking them questions. But usually most people would be like, but, I've talked enough. And, that to me is kind of a good rule of thumb is like, well, how many people are in the group and how much time is there? And that might mean each person only gets 2 or 3 minutes. And, yes, there's always going to be some people who maybe talk a little bit less, but that doesn't mean you get everybody's remaining minutes. So, Bernard, you look like you're on mute.
Oh, I said I have 2 questions for you because I think I remember being in the group where we were actually discussing this lady in your group. So
This is a new one.
this is a new one. Wow,
Yeah,
boy, you have quite a net there.
I
So
do.
2 things. One thing I suggest to you. So we also in not in the support group. This is not. I have another set of things I do, but one of the things we do is we ask people to follow kind of a format, like we do with kids. So we say, start with what is your question. So she can't just write. She has to have a specific question, and then
She does. She always does. And
well,
we answer that. Then she starts crying. And
oh, then she's okay. So, but and then does she ever give any positive things that she can do with
no.
this thing? No.
We give her positive things, but she always has a negative
And so this person is
response.
basically dominating time because they only want you to deal with her problem.
Right.
Okay.
Randy, have you ever asked her to talk to you in person after the group meeting?
I have, and I have actually called her and spoken to her. And it's still the same thing.
Yeah.
Have you explained to her what she's actually doing? Because
I have not.
sometimes they're so worried about what they're going through, they don't
Right.
understand the universe around them.
Yeah.
Right.
Actually, good advice, Dave. Good.
I do worry about her emotional well-being. So I'm trying to walk with kid glove or fight with kid gloves so that I don't push her over the edge.
Yeah, it's difficult because you're doing it at Zoom session, so she's not in your town. I mean,
Right.
I had a lady said she was going to take her life, but I
that's
but I
what
had
I'm
her in
afraid of.
counseling in 2 days. But she's
Yeah.
here.
Don't be afraid to call suicide prevention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're good at what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a decision that you shouldn't have to make yourself.
Right.
Correct.
Sometimes unruly children have to be put in timeout. She may have to be
Really.
put in
You're right,
timeout
Roger.
for 1 session.
You're right, Roger.
I hear what you're balancing, but at the same time, it's almost like she's taking the group away from other people.
She is.
And so
Yes.
therefore it's almost like then their feelings don't get to matter because
Right.
maybe they're on the edge too. And they really depend on this group. and they're not getting what they need because of one person.
Yep.
And then Ashley did want to know how could someone join your group, Randy?
I sent her the
Oh,
information.
okay. Good. Okay. And then before I do want to finish with room 3, Dave Rivera, Karen Pedersen, Bernard, and Roger. I know you're not shy people. Come on.
I apologize. I had to run out. I had HOA stuff going over here, but we had a good conversation where we really didn't talk about burnout, but we talked about many things, how to build groups, how to try to keep them going, how to reach out, looking for the Parkinson patient instead of for them to find the groups, some things that we could do. And I'm sorry, I didn't take any notes. Bernard, do you have any?
I didn't take any notes either, but I would beg to differ. I think we did talk a little bit about the things that lead to burnout, which is like trying to get these topics and trying to get more people in and maintain them and stressing over that. And especially not trying to be Mary Jane, who's the gold standard of all support groups. So that it takes some of the load and the pressure off of support groups and support group leaders and things that will eventually lead to burnout because you're stressing over it, you're trying too hard, etc. And being realistic about where you are. You know, you don't start these support groups and on day one, you're BAPS, you know.
Yes.
You know, it doesn't happen that way.
But it'd be cool if it did.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think there's something, and I think Dave sort of hinted at this in his talk. There's something to be learned from making the mistakes and finding out what works. If you don't test it, actually several people in our group said that if you don't test some things out with your group, you don't know. So you got to be willing to take a chance with things and don't overly stress on it. Not everything you do is going to work or be perfect for the group.
Burnout can be like sliding into a rut. If we find ourselves sliding and not driving, stop and maybe time to back out of the rut and get on high ground again.
Yeah. So that, Dave, I didn't mean to sound like I was just disagreeing. I just wanted to amend it.
No, you listen. I got distracted with what's going on outside, and I had to come back in. The other thing that I did say is that, you know, so what if you make a mistake? The only people that don't make mistakes are dead people.
Yeah.
So just go ahead and try something.
Beautiful advice all the way around. I'm so glad I plugged in today. And Eden, you know that I was one of those people you had to talk to because I was over talking when I came in. But when you told me how many people, you know, just like you just said, you told me how many people you had, and you had to divide the little bit of time you had among all the people. When I first started in that group, I was on the phone. I didn't know how many people there were. And yeah, just wonderful advice from everybody on, you know, mostly Bernard, you pointed out very clearly, and Greg actually talked to me about this once too. When I tried to raise awareness in Colorado, I was overwhelming people because I had signed up for everybody from, you know, Yaks to PD Avengers to Yopin. And, you know, I'm learning to pare down with these newsletters and different things that I'm doing, you know, like you said, tell them what it's in it for them and give clear examples and only give like 1 or 2 pieces of information at a time rather than telling them I'm involved with everything. And thank you. Again, I'm so happy to be here and reunite with a handful of people. Hi, guys. It's me again.
Well, I do encourage everyone to save their chats. We put in several links. Mary Jane said she will send me her slides so we can send those out as well. And I look forward to seeing everybody next month. We're going to have Rebecca Gifford here. So we're really excited. Yeah, I know. Things to look forward to. So happy, healthy New Year, everybody. And we're so glad you joined us today.
Thank you, everybody.